Welcome to The Lumber Word, where industry veterans Matt Beamer, Gregg Riley, Charles Dillatore, and Ashley Buckhold dissect the world of commodity lumber each week. We bring you up-to-date insights on supply, demand, and market trends, plus use our combined experience to tell you what it all means. Join us for informative and entertaining discussions that guarantee to make you wiser about all things lumber.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 112 of the Lumber Word podcast. We're recording it on the 5th. Hopefully we can get it out quickly since there's so much stuff in flux. Kyle Little of Sherwood Lumber, COO of Sherwood Lumber, is joining us. Thanks for coming on, Kyle. Welcome.
Thank you, Ash. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
You bet. Now, Kyle, I know we've talked about your genesis to becoming the COO of Sherwood. I need to know some more information out CNBC. What goes on there? Talk to us a little bit about.
I just want to be that important.
Yeah, no, I want to
know that important. That highly thought of and sought after.
Yeah.
I get to give
talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, first off, I just want to say I feel way more comfortable in this environment. This is the grassroots of the lumber biz, and I'm happy to be here with you guys because. Quite honestly, this is, being on TV and having these kind of conversations started from conversations here. And so it's been, it kind of gave me a solid foundation to go from. But to answer your question on CNBC, that really happened, I think, kind of out of, being in the right place at the right time and a lot of luck. In the COVID environment back in 2020, there was lumber. As all of us know, it was like the redheaded stepchild of all commodities and really never got talked about. And it, not only was it flying below the radar, it was literally in the ground, right? It was just nothing was happening and what have you. And I think there's just a lack of, not there's a lack of experts in the marketplace in our industry. It was just a lack of visibility of what was really happening in the lumber world. The cool thing that I grew up in this business, and very similar to you, Ashley, in a family-owned lumber business, it was a good old boys network, and it was a business that was very ethical and one where you traded a tremendous amount of volume, a tremendous amount of dollars with literally an agreement on the phone or a shake of a hand. And it was, I think, a lot of people in the industry just didn't really understand, what we did and how we did it, and how complex the supply chain is, and getting from the forest to the mill processed and then ultimately to the marketplace or to the consumer at the job site. So that was just a great opportunity that was identified. I think a big gap that wasn't there during COVID. And I'll give a quick story that literally they reached out to one of our traders, CNBC, that day, and the trader said to me, and some of you might know her name's Joy Robles, and she's like, I don't want to talk to anybody on TV and what have you. And she goes, but I know somebody who might want to. And she gave them my name, and they called me and they said, hey, would you be willing to, speak with us on the exchange today with Kelly Evans, talking a little bit about what's going on in lumber. We're going to do a test interview with you and two other traders. And I think they were basically brokers, or I should say somebody in Chicago or vice versa. It could have been anybody. I don't really know who it was. And they said, we're going to do some test interviews and pick the person we want. And I was lucky enough to be the guy picked. And I've been asked to come back multiple times since.
That's awesome.
It was fun.
Kyle's the face
man.
man.
Kyle, also, I just want to highlight for you guys, Kyle is currently chairman of the board of directors of the North American Wholesale Lumber Association. And I just want to say, from my standpoint as a former chair, I understand what that entails for you and the commitment and, the giving back to the industry. I think that's awesome, Kyle, and congratulations. And
can we put a little,
I could do, I'd love to be a resource for you.
You have been all through my career, and we joke about it a lot, but that's when I talk about, the industry and where we came from, I get a little bit emotional about it because it's such a really, for the most part, up until now, and where people are still learning about it, but it's been an unknown industry that has produced a lot of great families, a lot of great opportunities for people like myself, like all of us on this call, on this podcast, to go out there and do some really, really cool things. I mean, I'm the 4th generation that has been in the lumber business. And I don't think the 5th generation, at least on my side, maybe one of Kevin's kids will go into the lumber business, but my kids aren't interested right now. But I wouldn't push it away from them, because I think there's just so much opportunity in this industry, and it's built of, great people and just a solid foundation. And quite honestly, I'm very honored to be a part of it, and try to help others become part of it.
So I'd like to put a plug in for Matt Bruno for NALA also. And Kyle, maybe you should. I know we're members of NALA. Matt, your company's members of NALA. Why should people join NALA? Tell us a little bit of just a quick.
Yeah, I think there's like
just the paid advertising part, Ash. I just want to double check.
The pillars of NALA really are centered around, I think, networking, knowledge and education, and then just opportunities to kind of to give back. So that network from my perspective got me here on this podcast with you guys. I mean, in our industry, and I think having recognizing that we all have roles to play, some of us in competing roles, some of us in supportive roles, some of us in whatever. There's an opportunity for all of us, and I've learned a ton from people like yourselves. I've been able to go out there and through relationships built in NALA to sell businesses, to acquire businesses, things that I don't think would have been an opportunity for us in Sherwood and myself in my career without that network of people to go out there and lean on. And also, like, one of the things I think is so big about it is, like, people are willing and want to help you, which is pretty cool. Like, we're starting up an exterior building products business, and I called a competitor, somebody that's already in the business, and I said, "Hey, I'm going through these struggles. What do you want to do?" And they're willing and open to help you, even when in some markets we compete with each other, which is just, to me, like a really, really cool thing. I think, I think it just shows.
Some people use a different word to describe that, but
yeah, go ahead.
but just so everybody knows, NALA.
Let's not get back to the OSBs
thing. Just so everybody knows, NALA is North American Wholesale Lumber Association, and if people want it, there are events if you're outside of the wholesale distribution business that people are welcome to come to, and they're great networking events. So just real quick, how do people get a hold and sign up on NALA?
Yeah, I think the best way to look is just go to the website, www.nala.org, and see all the great things that we have there from an education, from the events that we have. I will give a plug that, for any of those up and coming leaders out there or companies that are looking for a master's education in a condensed period of time, we have our EMI, Executive Management Institute, that's coming up in the month of May, and it's hosted by Northwestern's Kellogg School of Business. I'm going to be attending. It's just, there's just a lot to learn and great opportunities.
I may have to come in and just audit that, just do it as audit. I did go to the NALA EMI back before Charles was born. At that point in time, it was at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And, I will tell you that there was at least like a half a dozen future CEOs of companies that at the time they were just, journeymen. But it's, if you, it's a tremendous program.
And we may have a new member sitting right here, Charles De La Torre and his company. I don't know if you're a NALA member at all. Charles, are you?
I'm not. I'm kind of ashamed of that, to be honest, but.
Nothing to be ashamed of. It only matters what you do next.
There we go. Yeah. All right.
I mean, Charles, just how happy are you that we're like this far into the call and
I haven't had to say anything? It's fantastic.
No, we haven't mentioned.
I haven't had to say anything.
Kyle,
is this the time where I need to come on and apologize to all of our listeners that have had to listen to me for the last 4 or 5 months, droning on and on about there's going to be no tariffs on Canadian lumber, apparently there are today. I've lost a number of bets. Apparently I'm buying Charles' Seafood Tower. And
I didn't hear the apology. I just heard you describe what it'd be like to maybe do it. That is the worst apology I've ever heard in my whole life. If my wife tried that with me, I'd kick her out.
avoidance, Matt. It's avoidance.
Yeah, it's like, maybe I should think about possibly somewhere down the road apologizing. What do you think about this?
I said I was sorry. I said, hey,
I've known Gregg a long time. I've known Gregg a long time. That's an apology.
I was wrong. I mean,
oh my God. Kyle, what were you gonna say?
For full transparency, Gregg, I was in your camp. I was just like, how can there be a duty or a tariff on top of an already, pretty strong duty, which is going to be increasing, later in the year? I didn't comprehend it at the time. And, for the amount of hits that we get with his administration talking about lumber, I guess we definitely did not hold enough weight to that. So we'll see how it goes out.
It'll be interesting to see, like who the biggest beneficiary ultimately of this. I mean, obviously we know that, Canadian manufacturers are in a world of hurt, no matter how you cut it at this juncture, if the 25 stays on and countervailing and anti-dumping go into effect in whether it's August or September. I guess maybe, Ash, we should get an update as to how Southern pine mills are faring in this new environment. Like,
well, let's talk about what's happened over the last month and a half. I mean, last month we've kicked the can down the road to now, right? And last Friday, we saw a lot of activity, and there is, in my opinion, a lot of price built into the market already based on the tariff conversation, right? And if you look at May futures, you could almost make the argument that you almost have 25% in. Maybe not quite yet, but you got quite a bit built in. And then we got to this week where we were waiting for the announcement to come out. And I guess today, what did they carve autos out, but didn't say anything on lumber? So I guess as we sit here today, do we have a tariff on lumber?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think this week, the cash market on the spruce side, we'll start there, was, fairly busy. As a company, we sold enough and got enough order file on trucks where we raised prices 5 times yesterday. And it was one of those days you'd raise prices and people would still call back and buy at your next price. And those days don't happen very often in this industry, sitting in a trading desk. So the question is, what do we do now, right? Where are we going now? Our price is going to continue to go up. Mills have come back on. So spruce mills have added 25% to it. Gregg, you asked the point on pine. I heard that there's 3 big Canadian mills that own Southern pine mills. One of them is trading at a premium above the quote unquote print Southern pine price. One of them is trying to get $100 over the market, I hear. Don't know whether they're selling or not. And then there's some Southern pine mills that, the smaller mills that are getting print maybe a little bit above, but I think pine probably has the most potential to get pickup on this if this thing sticks, right? I'll let one of you guys take it.
Ash, I don't think I need to be here because you basically just summed it up. That was honestly, that was good. Seriously, I'm trying to give you credit here.
No, I appreciate it.
Was unchanged on Southern pine. Can I buy anything I want at last Friday's print in Southern pine today?
No,
not at all.
No,
I can't.
West side $60 to $70 premiums. East side anywhere from 20 to 35. Central's probably closer to 60 to $70.
So Friday print in yellow pine should be up $5 or 10 maybe. Okay.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that sounds about right. I think you should. I'm going to start running a 2-for-1 special on 2x4 16s and Southern Yellow Pine versus SPF. I think I'll get a lot of market share that way, to be honest.
Kyle, that makes sense on pine, what you're hearing, what you're seeing out there?
Exactly. The spreads are still extremely wide. You talk about the most upside opportunity. That species has it. There's no doubt. The spread's just so wide.
Yeah.
And then we just really have to determine what's the new cash price with, Pacific Northwest and Canadian stock. It's interesting how we quickly went from, a premium in futures in 2 days to total contango the next, right? Where futures is actually the cheapest thing to buy. But we don't really have a good idea what cash is on those species anyhow. It's just somewhere in the middle. It's not the published price from West Fraser. We all know that. It's somewhere else. But that will get filtered out, and we'll find a trading level again. It'll be a lot higher than where we started from. And that's, I think, the marketplace has not recognized that yet. It doesn't seem like.
Well, that's a great point, Kyle. You know, what I hear back from the big Western mills, big U.S. or Canadian Western mills that also have a natural hedge, which owning Southern Pine Mills, right? If they don't get the 25% above these numbers, I mean, some of these guys got hit with that new CVD AD that comes out in a few months. You know, one of those mills is going to be at 65%. You can't. Some other ones will be at 45 to 50.
How do you post
time between now and August, September
in a duty?
Long time. September.
So first, Kyle, what were you saying?
I mean, don't even go to the extreme of the highest guy out there. Just even in today's world, how do you post 50% cash up front and on a duty? I mean, that's just such a high amount of funds on every transaction to get your goods across the border. I mean, it's unsustainable for many.
Matt, is now a good time for me to, quadruple down and say that the 25% tariff on Canadian lumber will not hold and that will come off at some point?
I mean,
good time for me to do that.
If you're
right after I said I was wrong.
If you're Kyle and Greg and I think the reason why we felt like it wasn't going to be likely is that it's sort of contrarian to Trump's stated goal of bringing down inflation and making housing more affordable and getting more people into houses. These are all campaign pitches, right? So those two things are sort of swimming in opposite directions. If we're going to have the cost of doing business in British Columbia and Alberta and Ontario and Quebec be plus 55% off the baseline, I don't think that works for anybody.
My interesting thing is on the inflation argument. So, I mean, I go back to inflation is a monetary phenomenon. It's too many dollars chasing too few goods. So if you raise the price of one product, that in itself will not cause inflation. What it will cause is that if the dollars that go into that will not be able to go into something else. So, I think saying, hey, it's going to cause inflation is a canard.
I mean, I think ultimately it causes demand destruction, right? You're going to see a lower amount of demand for more expensive building materials and more expensive houses in an environment where we have an ample inventory of unsold homes. And we still have high interest rates. So you can see where this is heading, right? This is heading for potential disaster when it comes to demand. And then when you cloud the picture of the future, we all like to talk about consumer confidence and how that affects our decision making. Well, where are you right now? Kyle and Greg and Ash and Charles, are you guys out there going out and buying all the lumber that you can at these new higher prices? I mean, nobody in the industry is buying that kind of volume.
No, I mean, literally, Matt, I went out and bought pine the last week and a half. And I'm a spruce person.
Too bad Charles did not get any of those POs. Well, that would have been nice.
No, here's one of my things, and nobody has to answer us if they don't want to. And I'll address the one thing that I see out there. I mean, look, I've made most of my industry on Canadian lumber, and my friends are Canadian, and honestly, they feel. I mean, when I talk to them, we all joke around stuff every now and then, but pretty upset about stuff. And I quite honestly can't blame them.
Right.
And I'm a big supporter of the U.S. producers. But at some point, when are people going to stand up and saying, we are waterboarding the Canadian lumber industry right now? And when we're done waterboarding them, we sneak up behind them in a dark room and stick a baggie over their head. So,
Jesus, that's dark.
It is.
That's 0 dark, 30 dark.
But I'm saying,
I think that's a little aggressive.
He just went.
He just went. Actually,
I thought I paint the picture.
Yeah, I'll just expand on that thought. I mean, same here. From my career, it was always Eastern Canadian, Western Canadian spruce. The majority of my career trading, and by far some of the best people that I've met, and still are some of my best friends in the industry. And I will totally concur with you. I've never heard them more upset and mad at our government, even to us, that like their demeanor to just me being American is different than it was before for whatever reason. Like it's almost to the point where it's in some ways it's our fault. Well, which because of the president that we have in place. Well, we're not going to debate that, what have you. But the thing is, we're just a small piece of a big pie that's getting negotiated. And we have no idea what the overall vision is, where he wants to take this. And the thing I was starting to think about last night is the reason it's going so fast and the way it is, he only has a majority right now guaranteed for 2 years. And he only has 4 years in total to get everything he wants to get done. So he's just doing as much as he can here before the midterm elections to go out there and get things pushed through Congress, so then he can continue to move on to the other stuff in hopes that those changes, which will take time, start to bring back a surplus of money in some form of capacity, new jobs, whatever it is, to support re-election for that next midterm. So it's a real challenging thing, and I think we're going to go through a lot of pain and there's a lot of volatility in our industry. But I totally agree with what you said, Matt. This is not inflationary. It's demand destruction, or it will create demand destruction if there's not the dollars to support the new level. And I think there are overall more dollars to support it. We've already seen, this is not getting talked about a lot, but the 10-year Treasury is like totally moving down. We're only like 13, 14 basis points from having a 3 handle here again. And you've seen 30-year mortgages go down to 6.7% now. And this week refi was up 20% or something of that nature. So there are certain things from an affordability standpoint that are turning around. And the other thing that I've noticed too is that where there's all this talk about the new homes for sale in the United States and how high it is and how concerning it is. Well, it's like 4 or 5 major markets that have an excess supply that are typically the most liquid markets in the country anyhow. So, Florida is seeing a reduction in price. So affordability is getting better in Florida. Texas is getting a reduction in price. It might not be going as fast as what people want, but the affordability thing in the markets that are really like bound up are starting to kind of get a little bit better. And there's not a lot of talk about that.
Right. Kyle, really good point. I mean, I'm anticipating, with the increase of supply and the more aggressive pricing, and, you can pick markets all over the country and you can see, big builders discounting the mortgage rate to 4.25%. I don't know at this point what percent of the new homes are controlled by the major national builders, but I think it's been a growing percentage, and it's probably in excess of 50%. They're going to keep that product moving. And I'm expecting, over the spring buying season, that we're going to see a decent uptick in new home sales.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it all goes back to monetary policy and to everybody's point about how dramatic this thing is and how long we've talked about the tariffs and the animosity that everybody has and people having perspectives of us being American, like we had an influence on this, right? I think the perspective needs to change, right? There's a scenario to where there are certain decisions that are made that are out of our control based on the ability to people above us to enact things that they think are big and better, big picture wise. But I think there's animosity towards political groups on both sides of the border based on how all this is all transpired over the past, 6 months, let's call it. But I can tell you one thing, anybody that I talk to that I do business with that is from Canada, quite frankly, is tired of talking about it. I mean, they're just, there's no animosity towards me. I mean, I'm primarily a Southern Yellow Pine guy, and obviously I'm going to push that. But the little bit of spruce and some of the things that we do with some of the Canadians in general, I mean, it's still a great partnership. So I think, this negative outlook that we've kind of built into this adversarial perspective just needs a change in general. Like, we're all in it together. I know, from a jobs perspective, it's not great, but at the same time, you look at the producing regions out west, the BCs, et cetera, they're a shadow of their former selves anyway.
Yeah. This is all going to blow over. We're in the shock and awe phase of the.
I agree with you. That's exactly.
I agree with that. I agree.
And, I have a lot of friendships in Canada, just like Ashley and Kyle and Greg. Greg, you you work with a Canadian company, right? I mean, Sitka. And Hampton owns Canadian assets and has a Canadian sales office, and we do international business out of there. I mean, we operate on both sides of the border. I will make one observation, and this is something I was just talking shop with a friend of mine in the business today about how Hampton has had, 30 plus years of high cost, hostile government, tightness of supply on raw materials and labor environment in which to learn how to operate. So this started in the 80s and 90s in Oregon, in Washington, and California. And we have perfected efficiency, when it comes to sawmill production. Like, we take an expensive log and turn it into $450 lumber, $500 lumber, $600 lumber. And we make a small margin somehow, some way, because we're efficient. We have figured out how to maximize the log. And the Canadian BC industry with the beetle kill log from 2006 through 2016, let's say, really didn't have to ever deal with that high cost, restricted supply type of issue. And I'm not sure if they've ever really had to deal with that kind of an issue in the history of the production process. And now they're finding out what we've had to deal with as a company for 3+ decades. And it's no fun. The only way to counteract it is to get involved with the politics. You're going to have to go lobby these people that run your provinces. And, you need support from the native portion of the economy up there. There's another element to it in British Columbia too. And then you have to have efficiencies everywhere in your businesses. It's the only way that you can survive in the long run. The government of British Columbia in general seems to be a little bit hostile towards the forestry sector.
I mean, that's a good question. You bring up a point is, obviously with such a large, all the timber's controlled by, the government, Crown Timber, they're paying a big duty, countervailing duty, because the timber is subsidized. So to a certain
it's
point,
not a free market.
To a certain point, the government could subsidize it even further to lower their costs. Correct?
Well,
yes,
theoretically, but the modern government of British Columbia does not seem to be very enthusible towards the forestry sector.
Alberta, Ontario, Quebec.
Let me ask you another question. Let's go back to the Global Wood Summit. The way I remember this is that when you guys were up there, you asked a question: what happened to the money?
Looking for equality of outcome.
No, the money that had been collected under the duty. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
You know where I'm going with this? You asked about the disbursements of that money, and if I recall correctly, 80% of the money had been given back to the Canadian sawmills. Am I misremembering?
80% of it had been liquidated. So every year, once final determinations are done, they liquidate that, and it just goes into the treasury. It's gone.
So it stays in the United States.
Right.
It doesn't go back.
They'll come the final deal. I mean, hey, they collected 9.7%, and the final deal is 9.6%. They give 0.3% back to the mills, and they every year they liquidate another year. I think they're like it's like a 3-year rolling average.
So this isn't a piggy bank.
So is there still $10 billion sitting in a pot somewhere?
Years in the pot.
That's exactly. I mean, yes, there is, Ash. There is 110%, $10 billion sitting in a bank account somewhere.
So my real
people are using it on a balance sheet.
It's gone into the treasury. It's gone.
I don't know. I don't think it is. I think part of it. I think an early part of it was based on a few things. I know what you're saying too, Greg. Because
I think it's sitting on people's balance sheets.
Do I need to get Zoltan back on the phone?
Yes.
Call him. Bring him
we
on.
do need to
Let's
get
go.
Zoltan back on the phone.
Well, so if that's the case, then this goes back to my whole point. And a CVD and an AD and their true form are tariffs.
Yeah,
So-
it's a tax on doing business.
So the whole
Right.
point is it's double taxation with the tariff.
It's all how you classify
Like,
it. It's
it-
kind of like sales
think-
tax.
Well, the
and,
tariff is
income tax,
a border
Ash.
tax, right?
That's well, all right. So we've beaten this one up pretty good, but let's go. Let's one little thing sitting off the side here. I had a note. What's going to happen to the European lumber coming in?
It'll get taxed.
It's being investigated. We'll know in 270 days.
So I mean, based on Gregg's track record, I'd say it's about 99% going to get tariffed.
Take that bet, Matt.
The shot was there. I had to take it.
Gregg's planning the next. But no, Kyle. So
hey, absolutely.
Which is a huge advantage for Europeans shipping into here in the next 270 days. Right.
It's all forest products. I mean, and from my understanding, so it doesn't matter where it's coming from, Europe, Asia, South America, and there's already a duty on South American plywood anyhow, but this is all, the playbook that we're following the playbook from 2000, his last presidency, when he, was used national security as a measure to go and look at the gaps there and saying, hey, are we buying too much foreign aluminum or steel, and we're relying too much on too much. It's not buying too much, it's relying too much on those things, and does it put us at risk? And that's what they're trying to determine on lumber.
Here's the thing. Okay, he signed something like an executive order to deregulate the forest and increase forestry production in this country from U.S. assets, right? Well, I happen to work for one of those, and you know what? It's going to take a little bit of time to get more loggers, first of all, trained and give them chainsaws and teach them how to safely operate in the forest. Who even wants to be a logger these days, right? I mean, most kids are going TikTok and they want to be coders and, work for X or Facebook or whatever. Like Kyle, you deal with this probably trying to hire young people to be in our business in the first place. And so do you, Charles. I mean, it's just not a glamorous business, right? Lumber is seen as sort of the, in the hinterlands. And we know that that's not true. It's actually a really cool business, but, trying to get that message out to the general youthful population that why would you want to be a logger, right? And then, okay, so let's say you do get all the loggers and you are able to release some national forest timber sales, then you have to get the mills to actually buy those logs and increase production, which means they got to go hire second shifts and third shifts, which it's going to take a lot to do that.
But if the pricing is there, they'll do it, Matt.
I was going to kind of the thought that this would be a welcome thing, because now your log buyers have an option to buy from somewhere else, and it's a leverage to get a lower input cost overall.
I mean, if that's the way it goes, right?
I don't know how it's going to go, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, you're increasing the supply of logs in a marketplace that you mentioned earlier has been operating with limited capacity, high costs. Like, this could be good for the overall manufacturer and ultimately the consumer, because it could lower up the overall price over time. And it's, to your point, Matt, it's going to take a lot of time.
Yeah, this isn't a 2-year fix, dude. This is a 5 and 10 year. This is a decade long. Like, companies like Hampton, Sierra, Weyerhaeuser are going to have to invest millions, if not billions of dollars into this idea that we're going to increase production. You're talking about building new mills, new planers, getting new sawmill capacity, new employees. It doesn't just happen.
What percent of capacity is the Western U.S. operating under right now?
I don't know, 50, 60%. I mean, we're nowhere near max.
So like, if you're only operating, it's a lot easier to get like to 70 or 80%.
If there's a real release of federal timber, like, I'm not talking baby steps here, like, let's do some thinnings. No, I'm like, if they're going to go back to the way it used to be logged when I was in high school, when there's 100 log trucks a day coming out of Mount Hood National Forest, heading to Maupin to the sawmill there. That was just one sawmill. There was 500 and some sawmills.
It's going to start off. I mean, listen, they're going to start off. There's some stuff's going to be available. It's going to be a positive for Hampton Mills and Sierra Pacific. There's no question about it.
If that's the case, you're talking about it'll help the mills that are closest to those areas where that timber is going to come from Mount Hood National Forest, Willamette National Forest. It's going to come from the Cascades, right? The Coast Range is all state-owned type stuff or private timber anyhow. And so that will help the mills that are like RSG Malala. They're on the backside of Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson. They're not that far away. So that would be good for them. The further you have to move the log away from the source, the more expensive, rapidly, the more expensive that log becomes. Freight kills the price of logs to the delivered price on a sawmill. So anyhow, we could talk about this forever. It will take some time.
You mentioned the North American production. Based on fast thing, I did a presentation a few weeks ago for a LBM CEO summit, and one of the stats I used from Fast Markets is the U.S. South. We have 25.2 billion board feet of production or capacity, and we have U.S. South, we have 28.7 billion board feet of capacity. We're currently running at 25 billion. So there's about a 3 billion board foot, maybe 4 billion board foot gap. U.S. West Coast, we have 10.6 billion board feet of capacity. Inland, we have 6 billion. So that's roughly just over, that's six, let's use round numbers, 16.5 billion board feet of capacity. And today we're running at 9 in the U.S. West and 5.3. So 15.3. So you have an additional 1.5 billion board feet of capacity in the U.S. West. At least this is from their side.
There's 5 billion feet of potential capacity. You're never gonna you never get to 100%. I mean, like a low 80%. I mean, operating rate is probably about as much as you can do with all the labor issues and whatnot. But listen, there is some capacity. There is some capacity available there. That's for sure.
Well, Matt, I asked yesterday at a U.S. West sawmill. I was speaking with one of their management, and how long would it take you to increase your capacity by adding a shift? And they said, adding another shift is right now getting the labor is almost impossible. It feels like terrible, but maybe we could add hours to a current shift, or work on a Saturday or a Sunday, move to a 7-day work week, and what have you. That might be something you do. And I said, well, what does that do to your current production? He goes, that basically adds one sawmill to our production. So that's not like we're not
one sawmill out of how many? 10.
Well, I don't want to share.
No, you don't have to tell, but I mean, that's obviously it's a big company,
big
somebody like Hampton, right?
Yeah.
So I would just point out that what happened in 2021, 22 with all the surges in demand is what would happen again if we saw a surge in demand, which is you start working Saturdays and you go longer during the day. So instead of running an 8-hour shift, maybe run a 10-hour shift or a 12-hour shift. You don't add a shift, you just extend your hours and you pay more overtime. And so that's pretty much what happened in those years. And that's what the first reaction would be. And the reason why the other reason, Kyle, that the mills are hesitant to add shifts beyond the labor problem is that when you start increasing your production, you need to buy more logs, right? And there's only going to be so many logs for sale. Well, guess what? These log sellers, they're pretty savvy too. They're sharp businessmen. They know that if the surge in demand is coming from lumber, their prices are going to go up. So they'll withhold supply and drive the price of Doug fir logs way up in a short period of time. And
so I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. Didn't the Wall Street Journal during COVID write an article about a large landowner in PNW that felt like he got the shaft when he looked at lumber prices, specifically talking about pine? But there was one in South Georgia, and then there was one in the PNW. So I don't know. I mean, if you're dealing with the warehouses of the world, I'd agree with you. But some of these guys have owned this. This is their third cut, right? Second generation. They just want liquidity.
What I'm saying is that when the mills start bidding more heavily for logs and competing with each other, there's only a certain amount of logs for sale at any given time, right?
If you were listening to this podcast right now and you're a private timber owner, wouldn't you just raise the price now? Because the whole intention of tariffs in CVD and AD is one thing. It's to raise the price of lumber in the United States. And Kyle,
it's to raise the price of timber.
Right?
And lumber is a byproduct.
That's the intent of the whole thing, is to raise the price of timber. And just a little, retail 101. Kyle knows this. And my dad used to always say, I don't care if 2x4s are at $1,000, $1,000. Matter of fact, it's better for me. Right. I just don't want them to go from $1,000, $1,000 back to $300 and then back to $1,000. So,
but I want that.
We do. So let's not. Exactly.
That's funny.
That's my sweet spot. That's my sweet spot.
But back to Charles, but the whole point of any of this is to raise the price of fiber in the U.S. Period. That's
like Kyle said.
High enough? Is the price of lumber high enough yet right now to like?
But hold on, no. But one thing we're not. But there's one thing that we're not taking into consideration with this whole log trade. China is a big consumer of raw logs, and they just cut us off. Pine, all hardwood species, and I'm not sure about Doug fir. So there's a lot of variables that are at play, whether it's raw material, standing vertical timber, lumber, et cetera. There's so many things to take into consideration. 1 + 1 does not equal 2. And I think that's where, to Matt's point, right? If you're buying, if Hampton's buying from a national forest an extra 100 miles away, their bid is going to be reflective of that, right? Because they're going to want to sustain a delivered price.
Yeah.
Right. They want a delivered price, whether they're buying per thousand or per ton. So at the end of the day, once those mills that get close, that are close to those forests get full, the Hamptons and the tertiary markets are going to step in and fill that gap, which I think is a good thing. And I think, some of these forests need to be cut anyway, but there's so many layers to this onion. I mean,
the biggest benefit would be
if you don't cut it, it burns down eventually anyhow.
Yeah, the biggest benefit would be what Kyle said.
I mean, that's nature's way of renewing itself.
Matt, even when you do cut it, I mean, half of South Carolina's on fire right now. Sorry, man.
It gives the mills another option to buy their raw material, right? And so that would be nice, I guess, having a new entry into the supply side that could have a positive impact on the overall price of producing timber. But you still have the labor problem. Anyways, let's talk about
one thing I wanted to
we're going into the golden age, so why not make the golden age of lumber? Let's do it.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
I agree with you, Kyle. I agree.
Southern Yellow Pine, the futures contract.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So that was interesting, that timing of that. I mean, so full disclosure, the CME has been working on this for years. It was an interesting day to release that. I think that was
or an unpaid consultant to that, Ashley.
Can't confirm or deny that.
I don't think Ash is the only one.
No, I think I've seen we've all been put input into that. I'm pretty excited about it, and I put something out today. Somebody asked me. I've had 3 people ask me all kinds of questions on it. Main question people have asked me is, well, will the mills use it? I'm like, they should. I don't know if they will. They should, because Southern Pine is the one item that still trades like the Wild West, right? if you have one,
it'll make a man out of you.
But if you have one item that has a benchmark, and instead of somebody coming in and saying, I'll give you 50 to 100 trucks, 100 under print, you can now point to an index on something and say, well, on that item, I don't have to, because here's the price, right? So I think mills using it have a leg up if they actually utilize it for contracts, ETFs, and all that, and traders for forward pricing, better correlation. We've had, a terrible correlation between the current contract and Southern Pine, as people pointed out. Charles, you pointed it out 3 or 4 weeks ago, to the current CME. I think this is a good contract. What say you guys?
I mean, I think that basing the current contract on a rapidly diminishing species and region, British Columbia, Western 2-4 spruce, is probably not a bad idea to have some diversification away from that. And I do think that the initial step of including the Western hem fir as an there are other species allowed into the truck contract now, right?
Yes.
What is the hem fir market delivered Chicago today, Matt? I mean,
if you can find it, it's probably in the 675 to 695 Chicago range.
So it's following futures.
Yeah, it's a hard find. And 2-4 in the West has been tough here for everybody for at least a month now. This is not a new thing. I've talked about it in previous.
And why is that?
The increased 2-6 production, right? The mill's targeting more of that, which is something that I talked about 2 months ago. So these aren't.
Well, I think you brought a lot of data the last podcast on that, Matt. It was actually pretty interesting. Seriously.
I try to bring some value to this group here, even though I'm the low man on the totem pole. But
low man, I'm the youngest.
I will have you guys notice I got my Bill Walton, the legendary Bill Walton Grateful Dead T-shirt on here today. I am rocking the swag, baby.
That is badass. That is badass.
So the contract. What do you guys think of the pine? I mean,
so the thing I like about it is that the index that the price is based on actual transactions verified, right? So that price, we all know that you could drive a Mack truck through the different prices on any given day that the market trades at. And one of my questions is going to be, hey, how much will it tighten that up? I've had a couple of conversations with people that are like, I don't really like it. There's going to be way too much transparency. People are going to know what the real price is. And I said, wow, yeah, that's a real bummer. Welcome to 2025. But so, I like that. It's going to provide, it's certainly going to be beneficial to those people that, are risk managers, and, to have a vehicle that's more closely tied. We're still going to be able to get crazy and, use it to, forward sell, forwards buy, 2x6 or 2x10, 2x12, I don't know.
Honestly, the best part about this
finger joint studs, that might be a little iffy.
Ashley can get triple Texas hedge now, so he could be long cash and long 2 futures contracts.
No, I stay pretty much in check. But Charles, look at you're going to be, instead of being, Abe Froman, the Sausage King of Chicago, you can be Charles De La Torre, the EFP King of Southern Yellow Pine finger joint studs.
He's already that. He's already
Southern Yellow Pine solid 9-foot 2x4 and 2x6.
I think it's going to bring an interesting dynamic. I think it's good to have a little bit of transparency. I still think there's, some work needs to be done as far as reporting standards, right? I think there's some questions to be asked as far as what is that sample size? That's going to be my biggest concern. Because to your point, Greg, hey, what can I buy at print last Friday? If we're talking about the same sample size and the same sources, what does that lead us to believe? That's a real question.
Is meaningless on a week-to-week basis. It only matters over time to show trend and relative value between the different links.
Right? Okay, and I'm happy you brought that up. So then, to your point, somebody saying, "Oh, there's going to be too much transparency." Well, if we're looking at a big picture and we're establishing trends, right? Relative, prices, whatever, there's still going to be a lot of opportunity for people to make decisions based on outside data.
I have a question real quick. An observation and a question, but the first thing is it actually not for delivery contract? It's just
it's financially settled.
Cash settled.
Okay. So there's no ex-pitting this contract.
Based on the printed price of the index for the 2 weeks prior, the average of those 10 trading days.
On the east side, right?
Yes.
So the east side index.
Yep.
So the real question that brings up for me is, Greg and Ashley and Kyle, I don't know, Charles, if you're a number cruncher, stats guy, you kind of.
What are you kidding me? He
is. Okay.
Numbers guy.
I'm going to ask you guys a question then. What do you think the correlation will end up being after a year or two's worth of comparative data? So let's fast forward to end of March of 2027, and we're having this conversation again. Do you think that there will be a predictability or a correlation that's now statistically developed between the 2x4 spruce and the 2x4 yellow pine contract? Because for years, that's been a mystery to me, right?
No, I don't think it will. I don't.
It's going to be the same. It perfectly correlates. It doesn't.
No, that doesn't correlate.
You don't think it will correlate?
It's not even. I don't think so at all. No,
No. But if you're creating,
hey, can I use a futures contract to hedge OSB? I go, yeah, sure, and you'll be like right half the time and wrong half the time.
Right. Yeah. You're going to have an opportunity to play the spreads, but that's not going to be. There's no long-term correlation there. That's just.
What if there is though?
Undervalued, right? And
what if more people switch?
Right. The thing that I like about it is, look. The U.S. South now compromises 40% of the overall North American consumption, right? And it's going to move to north of 50% in the next 5 years in all likelihood. Now we have a derivative that we can offset risk in trading it. So it's the SPF that Ashley and I traded for the majority of our career. Now it's Southern Yellow Pine.
Kyle, I've been trying to tell y'all to offset the Southern Yellow Pine risk with me for years. It's only happened every once in a while, man.
Yeah, we've all been listening.
Attaboy, Charles. Attaboy.
it's like the equivalent of listening to CDs, and now we have downloads. We have, it's. I think it's going to be great for both sides of the equation.
No, I think it's going to be fantastic. But I am curious to Matt's question.
So I am curious if there's going to develop a correlation. My theory is that there will develop a correlation over time because you're going to see sort of a melting pot of species in this country if things keep going the way they're going, with or without tariffs, right?
Yep.
Well, that depends upon how much optionality large buyers give sellers too, right?
They're gonna be forced to do that. Ash.
Look, I think that it's inevitable. I mean, if I was a young trader right now, I'd start out in Yellow Pine.
Man, hey, Ash, can you pull that clip from 6 months ago where Matt was like, there's no way that your Pine's going to replace Doug fir in Texas? Can you please pull that?
Well, no, I didn't say that specifically. There are people that, this is going back to what you just said, species intersectionality, right? So if the buyers, ultimately the home builder, but who's his supplier? Is the retail lumberyard or the direct shipper? But ultimately, if the framers are okay with swapping around between yellow pine and spruce and Doug fir, and the building codes allow it, well, that's better for everybody because that gives more freedom to the buyer. And as a buyer in this commodity-based world we live in, you always want to have as many options as possible, not as few. You're always a better buyer when you have more options. And so if we go back to that, where people like, hey, I'll take yellow pine or Doug fir or spruce or hemlock on this job. Great. Perfect. I like that. Like that works for me. What I'm saying though, Charles, in my experience in Texas specifically over the years, Doug fir number 3 and yellow pine number 3 in 2x4 only.
Who's paying it? Details, Matt. Those are semantics. I'm
talking about one skew, 2x4 plate stock.
No, 4-inch. Hey, listen, 4-inch. You will never hear an argument out of me.
But that's even changing, dude. There are some jobs and some people that are now starting to use yellow pine. So that's changing. But,
the big reason why is because a lot of the southern yellow pine mills, they found a better way. These continuous dry kilns have prevented pine from being hard cased. So it's a lot easier to work with and drive a nail. So
I wanted to kind of put a book in on the CME conversation for people that listen that maybe home builders, large developers and all that. It's going to be another opportunity for them to go to their providers of their lumber and ask for longer term pricing, which more people should be willing to provide now that there's a instrument that gives better correlation. And I think it's better for the whole overall market, and it should be promoted. So I wanted to just go through everybody. Let's do our married date dump thing, but let's talk about what we saw this week, what items we like, what we don't like, and maybe what we see over the next few weeks in the trading sphere here. Whoever wants to start out, they can go first.
I'm marrying my inventory, I'm dating my inventory, and I'm dumping my shitty old inventory. There you go.
So your 2x4 8 number 3. Have you gotten rid of that yet?
No, but apparently I've got some other shitty old inventory that I have to do. We'll talk about that off the air. But,
mistakes were made.
There's an inside joke for you that some people know. Anyhow, no, I have a fixed cost on something that people want. And so I'm going to try to maximize my return on that because I'm not sure how much more I'm going to be buying back in. And, everything's cloudy. Like I said earlier, I have to do my job managing my inventory. And if you have beaks and feathers in your inventory, this is a good time to just get rid of it. You have more liquidity right now. You don't have to necessarily raise the price on it. Just sell it as economy. Sell it as the next grade down. Yeah, solve your problem. Don't ignore your problem. Take care of it now. So that's what I'm doing.
Yep. I agree.
All right, I'll go. I'm married to my inventory. I'm going to stay married also to the Canadian lumber industry. I mean, I signed a contract when I stood at the altar with them. I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay with them on this. In the meanwhile,
do they go to your pineapple parties, Ash? You talked about in the past.
In the meantime, I'm going to date Southern Yellow Pine.
Good luck. Good luck.
Are you stepping out?
And
good luck.
But in the meantime, I'm going to date Southern Yellow Pine. I mean, I like 2x4. I notice every time we ship it farther up north, we still have liquidity all over as long as we can buy it well. And honestly, if I don't, I'm hedging my job too, right? In kind of like figuring out what other things are going out in the market. Dumping, like I said, this is a market that's liquid, and I think I'm going to use it as an opportunity to keep moving items that I think are overvalued. I mean, 2x4 started out at 685 on the porch last week, and they've traded as high as 750 today, right? I think I'm happy to keep selling that product.
You got to raise your price. We sold over 800.
There you go. Northeast or Southeast?
Southeast.
Okay. And
perfect.
Kyle telling you how to do your job. Too?
No. Look at this.
I'm just saying,
one up, Ashley.
There's not much around.
This is perfect, Greg. I'll tell you about the. I'll beg forgiveness about the order I took before we got on here. Then, no, Kyle, you're right. So, I'm going to keep moving stuff, raising my price, but I'm not going to be shy about selling, because one thing I know is when you go through weeks like you go through this week, sooner or later, when they do go the other direction, it goes fast, right? And I don't know what's going to happen to do that or when it's going to do it, but I'm just going to be vigilant on that. And I want to have a lot of my trucks shipped with if they have an 8 handle on them, Kyle, before the market turns. So that's mine.
Well, you need to sell something with an 8 handle on it then.
Southern Yellow Pine is running a 2-for-1 special against spruce.
It's not a lot of words.
I know, I think, Ash, what did you pay? Like $500 delivered on 2x4 16s up into the Northeast?
Yeah, it was cheap.
Go ahead.
It's crazy, like the movement that we've had and the price structure we've been able to attain over the last couple of days. But the thing that I would, I think we're all confused, generally speaking. Like, we all came in with the idea that there wasn't going to be a tariff, or there wasn't, and if there was, it would be short-lived. Right now, it just doesn't feel that way, and it could be short-lived, or it could go longer. I think what we're advising our team to do right now is control what you can control. If you have something sold, if you have something that you need to cover, help your customers go out there and take care of their business and take it off the list and move on to the next opportunity. And from an inventory perspective, our strategy is, we're in the distribution business, so we can't be out of inventory. So what we're selling, we're buying and replacing, and we're going to continue to support the marketplace at all levels, and until it'll be up or down. The feeling right now is, and I felt it was like this before. The majority of the industry, outside of people that have VMIs and some inventory subsidized in the marketplace, the majority of the industry outside of those examples, I believe, has gone into this spring building season fairly underbought. And I do not believe that, given the circumstances that we're in today, it's going to lead to stable pricing. It's going to be really volatile here in the short term until this thing figures itself out. So on both sides.
That's good. That's good. Right? That's good feedback, Kyle. I never thought about the underbought. You like this day. It's the last few days where you see all these jobs coming over on your email saying, "Hey, can you quote me this?" Right?
Yep.
Yeah, they want it tomorrow, Ash.
I think
want it tomorrow.
I think that's really no. I'm saying is that, to Kyle's point is like, hey, how underbought? That's really the question. I mean, we've seen a lot of business in the last month where people bought wood where they were clearly buying projects or locking in business, and it was like ship in March or April. That's fine, and paid the cash market buy and hold. Yeah, that's I still have a big question on demand. Yeah, the big builders are going to keep their product moving. But I mean, we've had economists on, and we're like, hey, at best, housing starts are going to be flattish, right? I mean, that's kind of the best from a demand picture. So, I think the more time that goes by that the tariff is in place and it's not, and people begin to go, okay, yeah, it's not going to come off. We're going to find some trading levels. I mean, Kyle, to your point is, hey, if you paid, Monday's price plus 25% to some mills, God bless you. And, I haven't seen replacement cost. I haven't seen sales get to those levels on a lot of items yet. Right. So, and I'm a big proponent of, hey, I should buy and sell every day as a distributor on replacement cost. So, in terms of, inventory, like, Ashley's saying is, we've been buying Southern Yellow Pine. because that's the best value in the marketplace right here. In terms of sales, we're gonna liquidate a substantial portion of our inventory in the month of March, just because we want to be a little leaner and meaner. Because if we see higher levels of volatility, we want to be able to, cut left and cut right when needed. And when we have a little lower profile than we have had, that's going to make that easier. The one thing I did comment with a couple of mills was, they get people that put 25% on their price. And, if it's a product that is a heavy Canadian item use, there's probably a better chance of that 25% price holding, because, you're going to be able to sell at your old price in the Canadian market. And so to get the same mill return, you need to get the full 25%. Those items, particularly at Eastern mills that are primarily the U.S. market items,
9-footers.
I think they're going to be a bit more challenged to realize that full amount. But it's going to take probably several weeks for that to work its way through the system.
But I think, good to your point, Ashley, 9-footers are the items to watch because they've been grossly undervalued for such
years.
a long time.
Yeah.
And I know that multifamily is not necessarily coming back right away, but I'm sure you guys have seen the same as me. I've booked a lot more business for the second half of this year than I have in a while. It seems to be getting a little bit better, and you need Canadian studs for the majority of those projects. And that's going, and if there's a percentage of that's not available to the marketplace, that means a lot of people are going to be chasing too few items, which ultimately creates volatility. So all of a sudden, this item goes quickly from undervalued to being very overvalued relative to the relationship to everything else. So who's the benefactor of that? Obviously Southern Yellow Pine, we pointed out, but I think Dougfir 9s right away, right? Because that's a quick switch. They'll take Dougfir 9s, and Dougfir 9s really haven't seen a move yet. So, we'll see what happens.
What are Dougfir 9s trading at right now?
Matt?
Hold on. Stand by, caller. Let me pull it up.
It looks like Matt's in his pajamas.
I like his get. I like the get up. Oh, by the way, Charles and I were talking. I want to talk to you. We're going to try to do a live one at least once a month to start out, to kick it off, to see how it works.
Okay.
I had 5 people ask me if they could watch it live in the past week.
Greg, you might have to looks like
shirt on.
Dougfir 9s are probably in that low $600 range. Chicago.
Yep.
Is kind of what I just saw.
And spruce 9s are basically that now.
Yeah.
2x4.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they are.
Here's my theory on the market price. You're talking $800 16s, and we can all throw some data out there of new higher prices achieved this week. But then let's talk about the futures board. My theory, my golden era price that the futures board needs to stay at or kind of target ultimately is the 700 to 750 range. And I think that's sort of, if we're going to have 25% tariffs that stick around, and we're going to have future increases in the CDD and the ADD, then yeah, we need to be talking lumber prices that start with a 7 or a 7.5. Then some of the other ancillary items in the $800 to $900 range, like your 2x10 and 2x12, and then long lengths and things like that, because that will just absorb the extra costs of producing it. And that'll be the new market price, right? To reflect what it was trading for in December or January. Well, January, we're talking $550, $575 lumber. That's my theory. Like 700 to 750 is like sort of the golden zone. If we can get up there, that's where we're, ultimately what this market wants to do is find its next sort of flat line, where are we going type thing. And my guess is that's the number. What do you guys think?
Y'all can shed more light on this. I mean, you're a hell of a lot smarter than I am. I just show up and swing for the fences, fellas. Y'all give me the data.
Pull that abacus out, Charles, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, Matt. I mean, if you're saying the market needs to go, somewhere, at or above, mill break even. I mean, that's fine for the next 6 months, and then if once you get into the the late third quarter, fourth quarter with the injuries in the ADD, then it's probably $850, right? Chicago 2x4,
Right.
I'm getting this strange feeling that what is everybody say? The cure for high prices are
Higher prices.
higher prices.
Yeah.
I see this touching $1,000 before we turn this thing.
Well, the thing
Hold on.
is
Whoa. Hold on.
I do.
That is
Sorry.
a bold prediction.
I think the recency bias right now is too high in regard to where people think we can go, and because the path has already been forged there, and we've been, 2023 was the big retracement. 2024 was the consolidation, and 25 could be the start of a new cycle, right? So you gotta take that into consideration.
We need to see more demand.
If you look at last year's price range, right, and say, okay, that was, we argued that the market was basically in equilibrium. It was in the first half of the year, it was oversupplied due to Eastern burn kill. And in the second half of the year, it was a little undersupplied because we got down to levels that were, below shutdown prices, and we lost some. So you find that middle ground on that. And it's about, I'm going to say it's somewhere between $450 and $500 Chicago there. Mm-hmm. And so now we go fast forward and we add, the increase in the CBD anti-dumping and 25%. So now that's up around 600 to 650.
Getting close to mass number.
That's where we are.
Yeah.
Right. So, the justification for moving higher from here is what? Well, it's going to be increasing demand or further decrease in supply.
Speculation
and seasonality, right?
Or short term, excess inventory accumulation.
Right. So, hey, maybe I can ask you, we're 2/3 of the way through the first quarter of 2025. Have we seen a high or a low for this year as of yet?
What's the range been so far this year?
I think you've seen the low. The January 1st is the low.
That's 580. That was roughly what, 580-ish Chicago?
No. I think
Dude, we were selling lumber at 520 Chicago.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But we're talking futures here. You're right. We were selling 420 or 520, but futures is probably closer in there.
Futures.
No, I want to say. I want to say it was like 540,
right?
But I mean, the point being, Kyle, you feel like that's the low for the year, and I don't disagree with that.
I could get on board. Yeah, I could get on board with that. And with that said, I mean,
529 lower of the year.
Well, that was the January contract, though, right? So
But 2 weeks before that was 530, right? Right. Low of the year. I say that's the low of the year. We're currently at 650. The wild card, I mean, I think the high of the year, Kyle, in my opinion, is going to be in Q4. If 25 stays in and the tariff goes to 30, I think that's an 8 handle and late in the year.
Right.
But I think between now and then the 25 comes off, and then maybe it's going to be closer to the 800.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting times we're living in, fellas.
It's you know what though, with all it's fun being in the business. You just gotta keep your hands and arms inside the ride, right?
I'm just happy I have a network of such seasoned professionals to lean on for such good advice.
Well, and listen, you're getting a free seafood tower in Montreal, man.
Well, I don't know if it's free because in Vancouver, I'm pretty sure I paid for your dinner. So
you need to go to Milo's.
Crystal clear here.
That's because you scared the waiter away.
I mean, at the current exchange rate, it's almost free.
Oh gosh.
So true.
Well, that's the other thing that continues to work in
college night. Yeah, I agree.
That's the other thing that continues to work in, like Canadian Mills favors is exchange rate. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It does help.
All right, boys. Well, look at Kyle, thanks for coming on. And Charles, Greg, Matt, it was fun. We'll get this out tonight and give her
always good to have you on, Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle. I don't know you as well as Ash and those guys do, but I really like having you on, dude. You know what you're talking about. And
thank you
for sure.
We'll see you again.
Matt, you never say such nice things about me.
I know you never say that to Charles.
Golly.
We're gonna have to.
I talked to Charles. I talked to Charles on Friday and Saturday night, sitting around the campfire. He's okay.
Okay.
Charles and I are good.
We need
Charles,
to take that.
You're going to be a member of NOLA.
Yes, Charles, you're Nala. Later, guys.
See you guys. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Lumber Word. The Lumber Word podcast is dedicated to engaging conversations about the lumber industry, including trading ideas, market trends, and evaluations of overvalued and undervalued assets. We wish to emphasize that the discussions and opinions expressed in this podcast are purely for informational and entertainment purposes. They should not be considered as financial or investment advice. We encourage our listeners to make their own financial decisions, taking into account their unique circumstances and financial goals, and to seek professional financial advice if necessary.